Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart and probably same for you, Ashley. But my name is Karin Angelly and I am here with my friend.
Hi, my name is Ashley.
And we're going to be talking about self-care. And I personally don't even really like that term self-care. Like, I don't
I
know.
was actually surprised you used that word.
Yeah, I don't like it, but people relate to it.
Mm,
So that's the reason that I use it, but I freaking hate it because this is something that we talk about inside of my other business that we're running. We talk about self care, and I hate it, but I realize that people relate to it. But at the end of the day, it's not really like self care isn't all the things that people say it is, like going to get your nails done or your hair done or whatever. People initially think that that's what self care is. But if you're thinking that, I feel like you're totally missing the boat as to what what this actually means. So I don't know what you think
mhm.
about that. Like, what word would you use? Because to me, I hate that word, but it makes sense to a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know. I like my mentors have like just called it like doing the work or like your maintenance or like that kind of thing. But yeah, like I always do have my nails done, but that's not part of my self-care. Like my nails can be done and I can be absolutely miserable or absolutely
Right.
happy. My
Right.
nails cannot be done and I can be super happy or super miserable. So yes, it doesn't
Right.
actually make or break yourself.
Right. Yeah. So, but like when you say things like doing the work, people
Mhm.
don't necessarily, well, what work am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, what's the focus? Like, the
Mhm.
internal work is what we're talking
Mhm.
about. And for me, like, no, self-care doesn't reach, it doesn't like connect for me. But I
Mhm.
realize that a lot of people kind of need to get in somewhere and kind of go,
Mhm.
oh, like self-care isn't about what's going on in the external, but it's more about
Yeah.
what's going on in the internal. So,
Mhm.
really, like we're talking about self care, but we're really not talking about self care. It's about the internal, inside,
Yeah.
and how you're feeling on
Mhm.
that day-to-day basis. And what you said, like your nails could be done, your hair could be done, but you could be feeling miserable on the
Yeah,
inside.
for sure. And like I'm one of those people that I either get really dressed up or I look homeless. And my fun and my everything doesn't matter, Like I can look like trash and it doesn't make me feel like trash. I can look like $1 million and it doesn't make me feel like $1 million. But that's a lot of self-care stuff is superficial. And even in the spiritual, like woo-woo side of things, there's a lot of self-care that I think is just superficial stuff. Like at the end of the day, it's really about learning what's going on and awareness. So I guess that would be the best way I would describe it is it's doing the work around your self-awareness.
Yeah. And I would love it if you could name the things that you see in the woo woo that's
Mhm.
like it's superficial because I want to kind of create that distinction for myself, for
Yeah.
you, for everybody because I do feel like it's important that we talk about what's superficial and what's the internal that we're actually focusing on. So go name those things.
To break it down to bare bones, like what one of my mentors who's also your mentor said to me is that like focusing on like your like affirmation is like the most important in the sense of like doing the work. So one of the things that I say to myself is that everything works out for me. Whatever's in my highest good is going to come to me today. Talking to however you want to call it, whether it's your angels, to God, to yourself, like your higher being, like everyone has different names for it, but saying like what do I need to know today, what do I need to do today if anything, and like having that dialogue and like just starting that ball rolling, I think is the bare bones of like doing the work. After that, everything could be superficial, so some of the things that we've talked a lot about is like meditation, journaling, coffee enemas, eating healthy. Like there's so many things that we do to help ourselves, but sometimes it could be a crutch, sometimes it could be a smoke screen, you know. Like I do coffee enemas religiously, basically daily, and like that's just a part of my life, and it makes me feel so much better. But sometimes I can be like, oh yeah, I did my self-care today because I did my coffee enema, and it makes me feel better, and it makes me feel like I'm like thriving, you know, or whatever word you want to use. But did I actually have that inner dialogue today of like, what's the best that could happen? Like, where am I at right now? What do I need to do to raise the bar, raise my vibration? If I'm not actually having that kind of dialogue and that conversation, and I'm just journaling or just doing a coffee enema or whatever it is, it's just like a smokescreen, really.
Yeah. I think for me, the word that really gets it is what's the intention. So
Mm,
like
yeah.
any of those things that you could do, whether it's a coffee enema or a meditation or whatever you want to put in there, like
Mhm.
how are you going into it? What's your intention going into it? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I meditate daily and I love it. It's
Mhm.
amazing for my brain. But I
Yeah.
know when I go into it and I have an intention of this is what I'm going to focus on, this is not what I'm going to focus on, I have a better meditation than if I just
Mhm.
go into the meditation willy-nilly. I don't have
Yeah.
the intention. And that's like what you're talking about with like the affirmation of
Mhm.
like, how am I going to feel today? What am I going to think today? And
Yeah.
that to me is where it all starts. That's the internal work that we're
Mhm.
talking about, where it's not just the superficial of, oh, this is what I do because I'm so spiritual or whatever. Like, I mean, you can look at a lot of religions, and there's a lot of stuff that
Mhm.
religions will do to be
Mhm.
more spiritual. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it tends to be a smoke screen. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm tired of living like that. I don't, that's no thank you. When you
Mhm.
actually go into something and you have an intention of what
Yeah.
are my thoughts going to be and what are my feelings, and that's the most important piece. What am I going to feel out of this?
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
changes everything. And honestly, your brain is so powerful that when you feed that into your brain, the thought and the feeling of how you're going
Mhm.
to feel, your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and what you're feeding to it. So if you're feeding the intention of, I have this really busy day, and you could look at that busy day and go, oh my God, how am I going to survive? Or you can look at that busy day and go, wow, look at the opportunities that I have today. Your brain
Mhm.
doesn't know the difference between the two. So if you feed into it that, oh, this is busy, I'm going to have a really, how am I going to survive? Or
Yeah.
like, oh my God, look at all the opportunities I have. You are going to experience something completely different from those
Mhm.
two intentions.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we talked about this before. I think it was on our last one where like following the excitement, following what feels good. But there's also like there's addictions that feel good too. And so I think there's that whole mentality as well in the spiritual world. It's like, oh, I'm addicted to listening to this and burning this and like this is all high vibe and this is my rituals and this is what I do. And even for me, like I like coffee enemas feel good. Like the actual coffee enema themselves, not so much, but like how you feel after.
After, yeah.
Derek will make fun of me. He's like, you just like sticking things up your butt. I'm like,
Maybe,
well, not
what of
really.
it?
But in all reality, no, not really. I just like coffee enemas
Mhm.
and because of how they make me feel after. And so, but there's a lot of things like that. Like I know a lot of people that smoke a lot of weed because it makes them feel better. And so it's really thinking about like, is this feeling good because it's distracting me from the things that don't feel good? Or does this actually raise my vibration and bring me to a better place? And that's the hard part. And for me in my stage of my life, like I have a lot going on and I really have to calm down. And so I could keep a lot going on and never really stop and do. Like I could have another job, I could have extracurriculars going on, I could have things that I do for myself outside the home, like and be a busybody and never really feel the stuff that doesn't feel good. But what I actually need is for me to like rest. Like
Mm,
I need rest. I am someone that's really easily jumps into that adrenal fatigue area of life. I hit the burnout fast, and I take on a lot. So that's kind of part of my issues. So I have to really reel back and be like, you know what, like it feels absolutely horrible to say no. It feels absolutely horrible to have a nap right now or go to bed early. But I've learned that even though those things don't feel good, that's what I need to be able to have that awareness around my emotions and around my life.
yeah.
And so, yeah. Whereas a lot of self care is, oh, I'm going to go get my hair done. I'm going to go shopping. And it's really a distraction from the things that don't feel good.
Absolutely. And I'm actually reading a book right now. And if you guys have never heard of this book, you need to go pick it up right now. But it's called 90 Seconds to a Life You Love by Dr.
Mm,
Joan Rosenberg. And it's exactly like what you just said, Ashley, is what she, like the chapter that I read last night is exactly what she was talking about. What you just said, that's what she's saying. Like, how often do we have lower energy vibration emotions that we
mhm,
cover up by doing all of these other things in our life? And whether it's getting our hair done or being really busy or whatever, what are we trying to distract ourselves from actually experiencing these emotions that are
mhm,
lower vibration? And if we actually notice, here's the piece of the puzzle that I feel like a lot of the high vibe community doesn't really talk about, but I feel like it's really important to. When you give yourself the time to experience those
mhm.
emotions, and then go, okay, I've experienced on a physiological level, I'm experiencing the emotions. And now you ask yourself, now what do I do with that emotion? You can then move up on the vibrational frequency. But if you're not experiencing the emotion, if
Yeah.
you're not noticing, that's the most important piece, noticing the emotion,
Mhm.
that's how you experience it. A lot of us are just, I'm so busy, I don't have time to feel embarrassed or humiliated or shameful or whatever you want to insert in there. I don't have time to
Yeah.
feel that. I don't want to feel that. But
Yeah.
in order to move through it, you kind of have to notice that this
Mhm.
is what your body's doing, and the whole 90 seconds to a life you love. So this isn't heavily researched within the neuroscience community at this point, but this is what your body does on a physiological level. When you are experiencing an emotion like anger, frustration, anything, like you can insert any low frequency
Mhm.
emotion, on a average, when you experience that and your body releases hormones, it takes about 90 seconds for those hormones to cycle through your body and then be released. So if
Mhm.
you're not allowing your body to fully experience what it does on a natural level, you're in some sense you're shutting it down and you're no longer in tune with yourself,
Yeah.
which I think is just so sad that we do that. That's how we have a lot of men in this world that struggle with anger and frustration, how we have a lot of women in this world that have overwhelming amounts of emotions because we haven't actually dealt with, we
Mhm.
haven't noticed the
Yeah.
emotion and what it's doing in our body. We've just
Yeah.
kind of shut it down.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
just sad.
So would that be along the same lines of like they say when you're like watching a scary movie or like you're on your cell phone or playing a video game and your body, because your subconscious is doing it. Like so you're like, "Oh, I'm not phased by this scary movie," or "I'm not phased by the shooting game." You are,
Hmm,
because the
absolutely.
subconscious thinks it's reality,
Hmm.
and there's no exceptions to the rule. That's how our brains work. And some people are more sensitive to it, and other people are less sensitive to it.
Hmm.
But no matter what, that's how our brains work. And so, would that be the same idea where you
Yes.
kind of need that 90 seconds to release those hormones?
Absolutely. And she talked about that too in the book. Like some of us
Yeah.
have a lower tolerance than others to those
Yeah.
emotions. So if
Hmm.
you're tolerant, you're not actually like tolerant of it, you're probably going to experience a high level. Like I do not like scary movies. Those are
Mhm.
not for me. So I
Mhm.
have a low tolerance of it where it's like it happens and I'm like, okay, I don't like this. I don't want to be like forced into this feeling, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not for me. But one thing that I will say is that we have numbed ourselves when we're watching TV. We have
Mhm.
numbed ourselves to the emotions of what we're seeing, and I do feel like that actually does play a part in what's going on with us internally as far as feeling those emotions as well. So I know
Yeah.
for me, I realized this was probably about 6 months ago, maybe longer, maybe earlier this year in January even. I can't remember when I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I cannot watch anything dramatic on TV at all, and that pretty much means anything after I've
Yeah.
worked a full day of work at the hospital. I can't do it
Mhm.
because my body, on some level, has had a lot of adrenaline pumping because it can be a very adrenaline pumping kind of day.
Yeah.
And I've realized that it's not healthy for me to continue in bathing myself in those hormones after
Mhm.
having a really long day at the hospital. It doesn't work for me. So I think one thing that I see in today's culture is that we don't necessarily notice those things about ourselves. I didn't notice that about myself for years. I
Yeah.
had no idea what effect it was having on me and how come I'm going to bed feeling like trash.
Yeah.
Like I didn't understand that until I actually slowed down and went, wait a minute. I probably
Mhm.
shouldn't be watching TV when I'm feeling like this because it continues these
Yeah.
emotions in a circle.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like even like I started watching scary movies when I was probably in like grade 5, grade 6,
Mm,
and like super scary horror movies. And it took me, I was probably 16 where I'm like, you know what? Like I can now feel, like I didn't feel anything. And then it was like I can now feel the compound effect that this
mhm,
has had on me. Whereas other friends that started watching with me in grade 5 or grade 6, they were still like, oh yeah, this is awesome. We got to keep doing this. And so it was weird because I'm like, I was the horror movie queen, and
yeah,
now I'm like, no, I'm not watching them anymore.
yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting how we desensitize ourselves, how we get awareness at different times, or like even with my kids, they started reading the same books at the same age. And my older daughter loves the books, absolutely addicted. There's I think 16 in the series, and she's near done. And my son, a year younger, got 3 books in, and he's like, they're too violent for me. I can't do it.
Mm,
And he decided he wasn't going to read them anymore. And it's just like, so he had that awareness really fast. So does that mean she shouldn't be reading them? Or, like there's so many like things of like how is everyone so different?
mhm.
I watch a puppy movie and I'm like gone.
Bowling. Oh my God.
I won't. I can't. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if this fits into the same like category or not, but my daughter and Derek, they love watching like animals getting rescued.
Mm,
And I refuse. I will not watch them. But they're like, they're so happy. And I'm like, no, it's not happy. Like to me, like it has a happy ending, yes, but like it's not happy. And
right.
I feel sick and horrible. And maybe it's because I actually rescued so many dogs from such horrible situations, and
Mm,
there were so many that I couldn't rescue that it just is too much for me.
yeah.
But they wanted to watch Clifford like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, okay, sure, it can't be that bad for
Mm.
me. And yeah, I think we got like 5 minutes. No, it was the first scene of the movie, and I'm like, Clifford gets left behind. They come and rescue
Oh,
the puppies, and Clifford gets left behind. And obviously, I know how the story goes because he ends up having a family.
right.
And I'm like, yep, peace out. And I went and cleaned the house while my family watched Clifford because I was too emotional to do it.
Can't handle this.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I could sit there and like push through the sad feelings because eventually they would be happy and the movie would turn around. But it actually, like, Clifford made me feel sick. So
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to put myself through that. I'm not going to be here. I'm going
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we should be changing the word self-care to self-aware. And I feel like
Yeah. I,
a, a lot of people don't know what it means to be self-aware. I know you just described perfectly what happened to me the other night. I hadn't worked, I think this was Tuesday, but it had been a very busy day, and I was kind of like, okay, I've had enough kind of thing. And my husband, it was Halloween night and he really wanted to watch Hocus Pocus. And I'm like, okay, like let's watch Hocus Pocus. About halfway through, I realized that this was not what I needed to be doing and that I actually wanted to jump in the tub and then go meditate afterwards because I knew that I would feel so much better over
mhm.
continuing to watch that movie. And that
Yeah.
wasn't it. That's not like it's a scary movie or whatever, but no matter what movie you're watching, they are really good at manipulating your emotions with the music,
Yes.
with the story, with whatever's going on TV. That's the reason that the movie's so good because it keeps you captured with your
Yeah.
emotions. So
Hmm.
when you realize, wait a minute, I can't keep going in this cycle anymore because let's be honest, I've had a busy day and I don't need to be flooding myself with more of these hormones that aren't serving me. And so
Yeah.
instead of sitting here feeling like trash, knowing that I feel like trash, I think I'm going to bow out and say, hey, I'm just going to go take a bath and then I'm going to go meditate on my acupressure mat afterwards. And I
Yeah.
felt phenomenal when I went to bed that night. In the
Yeah.
past, though, I might not have made that decision. And
Hmm.
so as a result, I may have gone to bed going, oof, I'm feeling funny. I'm not feeling the way that I want to. And I think
Yeah.
that that's the piece of the puzzle that I want more people to kind of understand. Like getting so self aware that you realize when you need to say, this isn't what is serving me right now,
Yeah.
and getting connected to your emotions in that way where you realize that something is just holding you back from feeling those higher vibrational
Yeah.
frequencies.
And I think the hard part is a lot of times the things that we have to do to be self-aware and also like do what we need to do for ourselves once we have that awareness go against the grain of our culture and our society and all of that kind of stuff. Like watching Hocus Pocus on Halloween is pretty
Normal.
like, yeah, that's pretty on point. So it's really like being okay with that and like canceling plans on a day where it's not working for you or like switching up your career or a job or whatever. Like we've all been there. And it's like sometimes you take a step back from something that's really great and people are like, oh, why would you do that? Like, and it's because you're self-aware, you know what it's doing to you, and it might make your life really hard right now, but the body keeps score, like it's going to show up in your life in different ways, and it's not worth it. It's like all the people that retire at 65 and pass away 3 years later. like,
Yeah.
like unless you want
Sad.
that to be your story, like keep not being self-aware.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
I
feel
choose the hard now versus having no future.
Well, what ends up happening too is you start craving. This is what happens for me. I
Mhm.
start craving that feel good feeling. And when I know that I'm not feeling good, I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel like this anymore. And so it shortens the amount of time, it shortens that refractory period for when I'm feeling like trash and when I'm like, oh, I need to actually change because I want to feel differently. And I feel
Yeah.
like we've been having this conversation, you and I, recently a lot, where I feel like it was somebody that you were following on social media, Ashley, where you were saying that this girl wouldn't do anything unless she felt good about it.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
wish that more of us would be so self aware, so in
Yeah.
tune with our body that we actually knew when it felt good and when it didn't actually feel good. Because you kind
Yeah.
of touched on this a little bit earlier on. Talking about the feel good and like when things you think they feel good, but maybe they
Yeah.
don't feel good. Like being
Mhm.
so self aware, so in tune with your body that you actually know what it means to feel good and to
Mhm.
feel that level of bliss, to feel that level of ecstasy in your body, in your mind, everywhere, and
Yeah.
realize when you're not actually feeling that way and what you need to start doing in order to get back there again.
Yeah, because once you tap into that self-awareness, then you can start tapping into like the source, as the people want to call it. And so then you start understanding like everything. And for me, like this is my life right now. So it comes up a lot in our podcast, but I'm going to court and it feels horrible. Like there's no way. I would love for it to be not a thing. It is a thing. And so it's not really something I can follow the feels good for, like I can't just make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were in court last February, we were brought something like a schedule for custody that we could settle for. And I made damn sure I was aligned, self aware, connected to source, all the things before walking into that courtroom because I didn't want to make decisions based on me or anything. I wanted to know what was in the highest good for everyone involved. And so we got an offer and it was BS. And it was BS for me as an individual, but I also knew it was for all involved. And our lawyer said, like, I actually recommend you take this. Like, this is way better than what you have. And like not way better than what we were getting, but way better than what we had in writing. And he's like, I would take it because it gives you way more than or anyways, it locks you down for better. And I was just like, no, like I just knew I was self-aware in myself and in source. I'm like, this is not good enough. And I said no, and we got exactly what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
100%. And so there is that caveat of knowing that you can't always follow what feels good. There is going to be the some situations like someone's passing away in your life. Like both of my grandmas have been diagnosed with cancer within the last year. Like there's no way to feel good about those kind of situations. But how can you connect yourself and be self-aware so that you can bring out the good in it and
Absolutely.
all of that. So,
Yeah, I know for myself, I have a mentor currently that talks about this all the time, where when you realize you're getting in the depths of despair, let's just say that, where it's like you're in this cycle of thinking and feeling a low level frequency.
yeah.
Maybe you're thinking about, oh, I'm really sad that my grandma is passing away. You can stay in that frequency, absolutely, if that's how you want to feel. And
Yeah.
I have no problem with processing the emotion of sadness. I think we need to
Yeah.
process, but we also need to realize when we're in a cycle and we're just creating more sadness and we start looking at other things around us and we go, oh, that's sad too. Oh, that's sad too. Now you know
Yeah.
you're in a cycle. So
Yeah.
when you notice that you start feeling sad and you're like, well, I really don't like, I don't want to keep feeling this way. Now you actually have to go, okay, what's the thought that I can insert in here that's actually going to serve me in this situation? So,
Yeah.
in that situation, you could go, I'm actually really grateful that my grandma has lived. And I'm not saying this is what you need to think, but this is just
Yeah.
examples of things, right? So, I'm just like, my thought is that instead, think of, isn't it great that my grandma had a long, wonderful, happy life? I'm so happy for her that she gets to move on to better things. Like that for
Mhm.
me would instantly make me go, oh, yeah, that's really true. And that just because she moves on from this plane of reality doesn't mean that I won't be connected with her anymore.
Mhm.
Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm not still in connection in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form energetically with
Yeah.
her, you know? And so for me, that creates a lot of, oh, yeah, that makes me feel a lot better rather than sitting in the sadness for the rest of my life. Because at a certain point, we have to move through those
Yeah.
hard emotions. We have to notice them. And then we
Mhm.
also have to go, okay, I can't make this into my personality. I can't just become a sad person because everything around me is so sad. I have to start looking at myself on a deep level and going, am I creating this as my personality? Or is this just a momentary emotion of, okay, I need to feel this, I need to experience this, and then I can kind of move through it?
Yeah. And that's where it's like the self-care is the self-awareness of like,
Yeah.
along with what we've said before, what's the best that can happen? You know,
Yes.
what's the best that can happen with my court situation and with my grandma? Like, there may not be like a what's the best that can happen other than them. Like they got it all out in her surgery and now she's golden, you know? So you can still kind of ask that, but at the same time, like our grandmas are aging, you know, like that is a reality. And so what is the best thing that I can do to like make myself feel good, to make her feel good, you know what I mean? And have that
Yeah.
awareness instead of disassociating, because a lot of people are just going to disassociate and run
Yeah.
around over here and distract themselves and pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't work either. It's like, hey, how do I move through this?
Hmm.
And how do I actually help myself feel better, really help myself feel better, not just pretend. And I find that the faster you're moving through something, usually is that you're just really distracting, you know?
Mm.
Where we're humans of design of it's lots and lots of generational embedded habits. It doesn't happen very fast that we can move through things usually unless we've built up that muscle. And
Hmm.
so then we have to learn how to build up that muscle so that we can eventually move through it fast. But if you're new to this and you're like, oh, that was easy, you're probably just distracting yourself. So
Hmm.
you really have to dig in deep and really have that self-awareness of what can I do to make this really crummy situation that I can't make go away somewhat better?
Yes.
What's the best that I can do in this situation? What's the best the universe can bring me in this situation? All of it.
Yeah, I feel like if you are taking notes right now, you should write down what Ashley just said because the building up the muscle is
Mm,
the most important piece in my opinion. Like if you want to like notice the feeling and then move yourself through it, yes, you
mhm,
can build the muscle for it. But if you're brand new to this isn't something that just happens overnight. I know you and I have been working on this kind of self-awareness and taking care of our emotions for years. And sometimes I notice myself still getting stuck even
mhm.
though I've been practicing this for years. So,
Yeah,
one of the pieces that I think is so important is that we give ourselves grace in the process too.
yeah,
Give yourself grace and not feel like it has to be on a certain timeline or it has to go faster because at some level, yes, you may have built that muscle and so you are able to move through a certain emotion faster than another and no one can tell you except for you. Only
mhm,
you can tell yourself if you've actually moved through it or if you've distracted yourself from
yeah,
an emotion.
mhm, yeah.
So.
And that's a really hard thing to have awareness around.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably one of the reasons that you and I have been like, okay, who's my mentor? Who can help me figure this out?
Yeah.
I know like I'm always asking myself this question, and that's one of the biggest reason that I do meditate on a daily basis because things will come up in those meditations if I have the right intention, going back to the beginning of the episode where
Mhm.
we were talking about intention, if I have the right intention going into the meditation, things will come up that I'm realizing I haven't actually worked through that emotion like I thought I have.
Yeah.
And I can always tell in the meditation when it's almost like it's fallen off of me.
Mhm.
It's almost like I know you and I both have a mentor that she said this to me whenever I said, I feel like it just falls right off of me when I meditate and I know it's gone. She's like, well, actually, you can think about yourself as like a bug zapper. Like you've increased your frequency, your energy so much that you've just
Mhm.
zapped that stuck emotion out of you that
Yeah,
you realize you don't need it anymore and you've just completely zapped it out of your experience. I'm like, yeah, I really like that. That's a good way to look at it. But
for
I
sure.
mean, this is a practice. This isn't something that anybody, I don't care who you are or how good you say you are, we always have to be working on ourselves. And when we stop the
Yeah.
process of working on ourselves, that's when stuff really starts to show up. So,
Yeah. Definitely.
mhm.
And that's the hard part too when there's like you have a job, you have a relationship, you have friendships, you know, you have kids. So then there's different components to all of it. So you're like, oh, I'm doing really good over here, but you're distracting in this area. So it is a juggling act. And that's why really having that like self-awareness, that self-care of like the downtime, so you can really talk to yourself, is so huge. Because if you're not having that conversation with yourself, you're really not going to know what's going on. There's too many areas of your life to be juggling
Mhm.
that you can easily distract yourself from.
Absolutely. And when you say talk to yourself, like I want to talk about this for just a quick second too.
Mhm.
Being kind to yourself is
Yep.
so important in this kind of situation because
Mhm.
all of us have that negative critic in our head. Every single
Yep.
one of us. I don't care who you are, you have a negative critic inside your head. And you can feed that negative critic, or you can say, well, actually, I am a beautiful person that likes beautiful things, and I am always searching for what's in my highest good instead
Mhm.
of falling prey to the negative thoughts that a lot of us can fall prey to. So, when you are finding yourself in those negative thoughts about you, about yourself, like give yourself grace. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. We all have those days.
Mhm.
But finding when you notice those negative thoughts popping up that they seem to be on repeat, finding what's the thought that I can think instead that will
Yeah.
actually make me feel better at the end of the
Mhm.
day. And that's how you release a lot of stuck
Yeah.
things as well. So.
Definitely.
Yeah. So with that, I think we can call this one a wrap for TMI
Yeah.
advice you didn't want. And I feel like this was a really good one. How to take the word self-care and actually make it self-aware, and how that's really not a hot topic. Like self-care is the hot topic, but I want to change it. Like, and I feel like you're in the same place too. Let's change it from self-care to self-aware and change that
Definitely.
completely. So
Yeah.
with
Love it.
that, can't wait to hang out next time and talk about all kinds of fun stuff again.
Me too. Have a great rest of you guys' day. Thanks you for
Yay.
listening.
Bye, friends.